Okay, so this is how to play Caitlyn like a challenger in Season 13. Most players know that Caitlyn is an extremely aggressive laner since she has the biggest auto-attack range of all champions. However, this advantage not only allows you to bully your lane opponent, but also to stay safe while doing so, making it very difficult to actually punish a Caitlyn player. The Caitlyn we are analyzing here is Cloud9's Berserker, linked to his profile in the description, and as you can see, even after a jungle gank, the enemy didn't get any mileage. All that happened was that they traded summoner spells, so Caitlyn is effectively unscratched. Especially in lower elo, where your enemies won't respect Caitlyn's range sufficiently, you can poke them out of lane over and over again to accumulate a big CS advantage over time. But even in a challenger game like this, where the opponents are playing safe, Caitlyn still gets a lead in lane by pressuring the tower for plating gold. However, and this should be self-evident, you will get an even bigger advantage when you can first get the enemy off the map, claiming their kill gold, and then take extra CS and more platings on top of that. Yet this sounds more like the game plan for an all-in champion like Samira, not for a poke champion like Caitlyn, right? But despite being a poke champion, Caitlyn has, ironically enough, also one of the best follow-up tools for all-in engages that are not just effective, but also super easy to land. Of course I'm talking about her traps, so please pay close attention to how Caitlyn is using them in this fight. You get a free trap chain CC combo whenever your support lands their own CC spells, but you also counter defensive tools from the opponent like stopwatches with your traps. The fact that Caitlyn can easily play both a double poke lane with mage supports and an all-in kill lane with all-in supports turns her into one of the most consistent ADC champions imaginable. If played correctly, you're almost guaranteed to win lane with this champion, since you and your lane partner will always have perfect synergy. All you need to do is identify your support's playstyle and adapt accordingly. By the way, keep in mind that if you want to have educational league content like this in your personal feed, all you need to do is click the subscribe button. So lane phase is the easy part, but what about the mid and late game? Well, pretty much the same concepts apply here. Sure, you have to be careful because Caitlyn is a rather squishy champion. This means that every time an opponent can lock you down, you are very likely to just die. However, a well-played Caitlyn will make it very hard for her opponents to actually get to her. Between your massive range, your escape with E, and now also your dash with your mythic item Gale Force, you have plenty of tools to deny enemy engages. No one is perfect, but Berserker stayed cool and used his Gale Force to correct his positioning mistake, allowing him to survive. I'll talk about itemization more in depth later in the video, by the way. Anyway, in the mid game, your general game plan is to keep up the pressure by making use of Caitlyn's excellent wave clear with Q. While your rotations are not the fastest due to Caitlyn's low base movement speed, your pushing power will make up for it. As long as you preserve your E-spell so it will be ready when the enemy tries to punish you, you'll be fine. And the lane phase in general translates quite effortlessly to your patterns in skirmishes. You wait for your team to get something started so you can then follow up with your burst combo. Look at the sequencing Berserker uses with Caitlyn. Gale Force auto EQ and then E's headshot to finish. By the way, Caitlyn's ultimate is funnily enough your least important spell. It is always kind of awkward with its long channel time, making it very clunky in fights. You either use it at the end of a fight for a potential snipe, or simply for guaranteed poke damage while sieging. This might not look like much, but on a squishy target it can deter them from challenging your siege altogether. So playing with your range and discouraging the enemy from approaching you is Caitlyn's entire champion identity. As a consequence, this idea is also at the core of Berserker's Caitlyn teamfighting strategy. Some champions are very dangerous for AD carries in the mid-game, since they threaten to one-shot you and take you out of the game while you cannot do anything. This is even worse for Caitlyn because she is so squishy, but there is one key element to your positioning that allows you to bait even fed enemies. The trick is to stay exactly so far behind your own front line that you can attack enemies in your front line's melee range, no closer. This way you are a useful damage dealer, but the enemy still has to commit all their resources to get to you, so you can then outplay them with your own mobility tools. And while your E and your Gale Force, and of course your Flash, are your primary tools for keeping enemies at bay, you can also use your traps for that whenever you are in a situation in which you know beforehand where the fight will take place. When you, for example, fight over Baron, you can put down your traps preemptively to block off entire jungle paths, effectively creating a wall that the enemy cannot challenge as long as you and your team are nearby. It is really a lose-lose situation for them. If they don't challenge you, your team just gets a free Dragon or Baron. Yet, if they do try to contest, Caitlyn essentially gets a guaranteed stun on them, which means this happens. Even if the opponent who stepped on the trap survives your initial burst, you then still get to stack your lethal tempo on them for free and carry the fight from there. Caitlyn effectively is for the bot lane what control mages are for the mid lane. Her zoning is godlike, and as long as you put that strength to use, she will seem untouchable. As far as Caitlyn's power curve is concerned, you've already seen that you can play offense and defense at the same time during the lane phase, and that you should use your range and mobility to stay safe during the mid game. But just like most crit marksmen, Caitlyn scales extremely well with items. This means you can play fights more and more aggressively the later the game goes, since the more items everyone has, the greater Caitlyn's relative power. Since killing your target only takes a couple shots at this point, you can now be much more aggressive in your spell usage. The enemy has less time to get to you, since they would die much faster, so you won't need all your tools to keep your distance. By the way, in case you're mad at yourself for not getting the free trap follow-up 100% of the time, don't worry. It also occasionally happens to Challenger players. But let's now talk about Caitlyn's optimal rune and item setups so you know exactly what to play. Berserker's Caitlyn rune page is Lethal Tempo, Presence of Mind, Legend Bloodline and Coup de Grace with Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm secondary. As shown, Lethal Tempo is a crazy strong tool in extended fights and skirmishes. Yes, Caitlyn's burst damage is excellent with her headshot combos, but in proper teamfights, dealing consistent damage over longer periods of time is super important, and Lethal Tempo allows you to do that even when you do not have many attack speed items. However, against enemy bot lane combos who have strong synergy in lane themselves, Berserker will go for fleet footwork instead to ensure he will still have complete lane dominance. Presence of Mind is chosen in the next row since Caitlyn's spells are crucial to her early game success. While you poke a lot with your autos, a large part of your poke damage will in fact also come from your Q. Additionally, always having the mana needed to make an escape with E or to follow up with W traps is necessary in order to win lane consistently. Legend Bloodline is chosen so Caitlyn can rush more aggressive damage items to buff her all-in combo with extra burst, since she doesn't need to purchase a lifesteal item now. Coup de Grace is a weird one. Sure, the rune is perfect for even more early game pressure with its execute damage, but historically Caitlyn has always picked cut down instead to weaponize her low base HP. In fact, most Challenger players still go cut down on Caitlyn, despite the meta shifting away from longsword 3 potion start. But Berserker thinks the 80 extra health from your preferred starting item Doran's Blade makes cut down too weak during the early game, so he goes for coup de grace nowadays. Caitlyn's headshots and all-in combo massively scale with bonus attack damage, so both Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm are chosen for your secondary runes to make your burst damage as deadly as possible. In general, maximizing your bonus AD and crit is the way to go on Caitlyn for this very reason, which also shows in Caitlyn's optimal item build. Your core items are Gale Force first and Infinity Edge second, only then upgrading your boots to Berserker's Greaves. You've already seen during the analysis how vital Gale Force's active effect is on such a high priority target like Caitlyn. Using this cooldown well can make or break this champion, so knowing when you actually need it and when you can save it for later is a huge aspect of learning to play Caitlyn. You rely on good positioning since Caitlyn is so squishy that even the extra tankiness from Shield Bow would not be enough to stop the enemy from one-shotting you. Now Caitlyn was one of the biggest winners when Infinity Edge's activation threshold got lowered from 60% crit down to 40% crit. Caitlyn's headshots directly scale with crit and crit modifiers, so being able to get IE second is a huge buff to your mid-game, which is generally speaking your weakest stage of the game, so it benefits from buffs the most. Afterwards, you finally opt into some attack speed with rapid fire cannon, as now during the team fighting stage, your consistent DPS starts to matter a lot more. Additionally, the extra attack range is super valuable on Caitlyn, since you can now stay even safer while sieging. Lord Doms or Mortar Reminder are chosen next, because in the late game everyone has a lot of base armor, so a Last Whisper item is mandatory. Keep in mind that Caitlyn generally prefers Lord Dom's passive instead of healing reduction if you can help it, since the Giant Slayer is really good on such a low HP champion. Guardian Angel keeps you safe in the very late game, but other defensive options like Bloodthirster or Scimitar are also viable, of course. Now the lane phase is almost like a walk in the park with Caitlyn, but the early mid-game is where many Caitlyn players throw their lead away. To ensure this won't happen to you, I recommend you watch my AD Carry macro guide by clicking the link on your screen right there.